Late 1950s. Las Vegas, Nevada. Meyer Lansky walked through the Flamingo Hotel and Casino like a ghost. No nameplate on the door. No ownership papers with his signature. No public acknowledgement he was there at all. Yet every dollar that moved through that casino, every decision about operations, every percentage point of profit, it all flowed through him. They called him the mob's accountant, the man who revolutionized organized crime by making it invisible. While traditional gangsters like Al Capone got arrested for tax evasion and Bugsy Siegel got shot for mismanaging money, Lansky had watched and learned. He'd done what no other mobster had accomplished. He'd made himself untouchable through financial sophistication. Numbered Swiss bank accounts with passwords instead of names. Offshore shell companies layered so deep even the smartest investigators couldn't penetrate them. A points system of hidden ownership where his name appeared nowhere, yet he controlled everything. The Flamingo, the Sands, the Thunderbird, the Tropicana. Lansky held secret ownership interests in every major casino on the Las Vegas Strip, estimated at nearly 30% of the city's gambling empire. His $2.2 million in casino investments generated over $1 million in cash annually from systematically skimmed profits. All invisible, all untraceable, all genius. Las Vegas officials had no idea. They saw legitimate businessmen running casinos. Front operators whose names were on the licenses, who attended the meetings, who appeared to own everything. Behind the curtain, pulling every string like the Wizard of Oz, Lansky controlled an empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He'd even told associates, "We're bigger than US Steel," and he believed American law enforcement would never catch him. FBI agents were street cops who understood violence, not sophisticated financial criminals who used legitimate banking systems to hide illegal profits. Lansky had watched lesser gangsters make mistakes and get caught. He was smarter, more sophisticated, untouchable. He had no idea the FBI was already building a file on him. Meyer Lansky wasn't worried because he'd learned from everyone else's mistakes. In 1931, he'd watched Al Capone, the most powerful gangster in America, get convicted not for murder, not for bootlegging, but for tax evasion. Capone had controlled Chicago through violence and intimidation, yet a team of accountants had brought him down. Lansky had taken notes. He vowed he would never make the same mistake. He would be smarter, more sophisticated, completely invisible. And for nearly 3 decades, it had worked perfectly. Lansky had revolutionized organized crime by understanding what traditional gangsters didn't. In modern America, the real power wasn't in who you could kill, but in what you could hide. While other mobsters flaunted their wealth and put their names on properties, Lansky operated in the shadows. No paper trails, no direct ownership, no fingerprints connecting him to anything illegal. His system was elegant in its sophistication. Hand-picked front operators, carefully selected loyal associates who would serve as the public face of casino ownership. They got paid well to ensure their loyalty and their silence. Behind the curtain, Lansky pulled every string, made every major decision, collected every percentage point of profit. Like the Wizard of Oz, he was everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. The skim was his masterpiece. While casinos reported certain profits to the IRS and Nevada gaming authorities, a proportionate amount, never too aggressive, never too obvious, was systematically diverted before it ever appeared on official books. His $2.2 million in Las Vegas casino investments were generating over $1 million in cash income annually from these skim profits, money that flowed to numbered Swiss bank accounts he'd pioneered using in 1932. Accounts with passwords instead of names. Accounts that American investigators couldn't penetrate, or so he believed. When the Kefauver Committee began investigating organized crime in 1950, bringing the hearings into American living rooms via television, Lansky appeared before Congress. He denied everything, refused to answer self-incriminating questions, and walked away untouched. Las Vegas officials testified there was no organized crime problem in their city. They genuinely didn't know Lansky controlled their casino industry. His only stumble came in 1953, when a Saratoga Springs gambling investigation caught him in upstate New York. 16 months of grand jury inquiries led to indictments for his hidden ownership of the Arrowhead Inn. Lansky pleaded guilty to 5 misdemeanor counts of gambling and conspiracy, 3 months in Saratoga County Jail, and $2,500 in fines, the only jail time he would ever serve in his entire criminal career. He served the sentence, was released early for good behavior, and returned to business as usual. The 1953 conviction was an anomaly, he told associates. a minor setback in small-time gambling operations far from his real empire. His Las Vegas interests remained completely untouched, completely invisible, completely protected by layers of financial sophistication that street cops and even FBI agents couldn't hope to understand. Lansky believed American law enforcement was fundamentally limited. They understood violence. They could catch killers and bank robbers. But sophisticated financial crimes using legitimate banking systems, offshore accounts, and layered corporate structures? That required an intelligence most cops simply didn't possess. In bugged hotel rooms during the late 1950s, FBI surveillance caught Lansky watching television discussions about organized crime. When a panelist claimed organized crime was second in size only to the US government, Lansky remarked to his wife that organized crime was bigger than US steel. The comment revealed his supreme confidence. He didn't just think he was running a criminal enterprise. He thought he was running an invisible corporate empire beyond American law enforcement's reach. What Lansky didn't know was that the FBI agents listening to those bugged conversations were building a file, a detailed, methodical, years-long investigation into every casino interest, every front operator, every skimmed dollar, every numbered account. American financial investigators were proving to be far more sophisticated than the mob's accountant had ever imagined. The trap was already being set. Lansky just couldn't see it yet. The walls started closing in on Meyer Lansky in 1970. After years of methodical surveillance, after countless hours of bugged hotel room conversations, after tracking financial transactions through layers of shell companies and numbered accounts, US federal prosecutors filed charges that struck at the heart of Lansky's invisible empire: tax evasion for concealing and distributing $36 million in unreported income between 1960 and 1967. The same crime that had brought down Al Capone was now being used against the man who'd vowed never to make Capone's mistake. But this wasn't simple tax evasion. The indictment revealed something far more damaging. The FBI had penetrated Lansky's financial sophistication. They had documented his hidden ownership structure. During 1970 and 1971, a federal grand jury in Miami investigated the concealment and distribution of income from the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas. The investigation revealed evidence that Lansky was a participant in the scheme to conceal and distribute casino income during the years 1960-1967. The FBI knew everything: his $2.2 million in Las Vegas casino investments, the over $1 million in cash income from skim profits annually, his crucial position as the conduit for casino investments, his secret percentage points in the Flamingo, the Sands, the Thunderbird, the Tropicana, the elaborate system of front operators and hidden ownership that he'd believed made him untouchable. American financial investigators had done what Lansky thought impossible. They'd mapped his entire invisible empire. The evidence came from multiple sources. FBI surveillance had caught him on bugged hotel rooms discussing organized crime operations. When asked about the size of organized crime in America, Lansky had boasted it was bigger than US steel, a statement now being used against him. Federal agents had tracked his movements, documented his meetings, identified his associates. Then there were the informants. Vincent "Fat Vinny" Teresa, a mafia informer, provided testimony claiming he delivered gambling profits directly to Lansky in Florida. The mob's code of silence, omerta, was breaking down under FBI pressure. Men who'd sworn loyalty were now testifying against the mob's accountant to save themselves. In 1972, additional charges hit: indictment for skimming millions from Vegas casinos. The very system Lansky had perfected, the proportionate, methodical diversion of casino profits before they appeared on official books, was now laid bare in federal court documents. The FBI had tracked the money flows, identified the front operators, documented the numbered Swiss accounts. Lansky made a desperate move. He fled to Herzliya Pitua, Israel, seeking refuge under the law of return that allowed any Jew to legally settle in Israel. As a strong sympathizer with Israel and a Jewish American, he believed Israeli law would protect him. The country didn't permit extradition of Israeli citizens, and he applied for citizenship. For 2 years, Lansky lived in Israel while fighting deportation. He hired lawyers, he argued his case. But the Israeli government had a provision in the law of return. They reserved the right to exclude Jews with a criminal past from settling in the country. The application was denied on grounds that because of his criminal past, he would be likely to endanger the public welfare. In November 1972, Israel deported Meyer Lansky back to the United States. He was arrested at Miami International Airport. The man who'd controlled a gambling empire stretching across Las Vegas, Cuba, Miami, and New Orleans, who'd revolutionized organized crime through financial sophistication, who'd believed American law enforcement couldn't penetrate his system, now stood in handcuffs facing federal prosecutors who knew every detail of his hidden empire. The grand jury subpoenaed him to testify. When service was attempted in Tel Aviv, Lansky's attorney tried to quash it, claiming health issues. Lansky had suffered heart attacks and had a duodenal ulcer. But the court wasn't sympathetic. When Lansky failed to appear, he was indicted for criminal contempt. The charges piled up: tax evasion, contempt, skimming. The mob's accountant, who'd spent decades building an invisible financial empire, was about to face American justice. And every numbered account, every hidden ownership interest, every skimmed dollar was now documented in FBI files that would be presented to juries. The financial genius had been outsmarted by American persistence. The trials of Meyer Lansky exposed the ultimate irony of the mob's accountant. In July 1973, after years of FBI investigation and months of legal battles, Lansky faced trial in Miami Federal District Court for income tax evasion. The federal government brought its star witness, Vincent "Fat Vinny" Teresa, a mafia informer who testified that he'd personally delivered gambling profits to Lansky in Florida. Here was the mob's code of silence, omerta, broken. A made man testifying against the financial wizard who'd supposedly built an untouchable empire. The government laid out its case methodically. Years of surveillance, documented casino connections, evidence of the skim, testimony about hidden ownership interests worth millions. On July 25, 1973, the jury returned its verdict: not guilty. The Miami jury simply didn't believe Fat Vinny Teresa. Lansky had proven he was in other locations when Teresa claimed to have met him. The government's case, built on informant testimony, collapsed. Lansky walked out of court a free man. It seemed like vindication. The financial genius had beaten the FBI after all, but the victory was hollow, and Lansky knew it. His contempt conviction for refusing to testify before the grand jury while in Israel had resulted in a guilty verdict on February 28, 1973, a year in prison. But even that was overturned on appeal. The appeals court ruled that the government had made compliance virtually impossible by demanding his return on impossibly short notice while he was under doctor's care in Israel. The reversal stated there was insufficient evidence upon which a jury might reasonably find that the accused was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. More charges followed. In 1972, indictment for skimming millions from Las Vegas casinos. But by now, Lansky was 70 years old and his health was failing. Heart attacks, a duodenal ulcer, arteriosclerotic heart disease, angina pectoris. The stress of years of investigations and trials was literally killing him. The final skimming case was dismissed in 1976 when a judge determined Lansky was too ill to stand trial. The mob's accountant had managed to escape violent ends that befell so many fellow mobsters. But he hadn't escaped justice. He'd simply outlived it through deteriorating health. The real mockery came in what the FBI investigations had accomplished, even without convictions. When Howard Hughes began buying up Las Vegas casinos in 1967, it marked the beginning of the end for mob control. Media attention and law enforcement pressure from the Lansky investigations had made hidden ownership untenable. One by one, the casinos sold to legitimate corporate owners. The scheme dried up. The point system dissolved. The invisible empire became visible, and then vanished. Before fleeing Cuba in 1959, when Castro seized power, Lansky had been worth an estimated $20 million, equivalent to $184 million today. The FBI believed he had millions hidden in numbered Swiss accounts, offshore banks, and shell companies around the world. They investigated for years trying to locate these hidden fortunes. When Meyer Lansky died of lung cancer on January 15, 1983, at age 80, his family learned the truth. His estate was worth approximately $57,000. That's all. No hidden millions, no offshore fortunes, no vast criminal empire of wealth. The FBI had been right about one thing. Lansky had controlled a massive criminal operation, but they'd also accomplished something even without convictions. They'd exposed it, and once exposed, it couldn't survive. The casinos were sold. The hidden ownership interests dissolved. The sophisticated financial structures that Lansky had spent decades building were dismantled by corporate buyouts and regulatory oversight. Despite nearly 50 years as a member and participant in organized crime, Lansky was never found guilty of anything more serious than illegal gambling. His 1953 misdemeanor conviction in Saratoga Springs, 3 months in jail and $2,500 in fines. That was it. But he'd lost everything anyway. The man who told associates organized crime was bigger than US Steel died with less money than most middle-class Americans. The mob's financial wizard, who'd revolutionized criminal enterprise through offshore banking and money laundering, ended his life in a modest Miami apartment with virtually nothing. The FBI hadn't needed to convict Meyer Lansky to defeat him. They'd simply needed to expose him. And American investigative persistence had accomplished exactly that. The FBI investigations into Meyer Lansky accomplished something remarkable. They exposed what Las Vegas officials genuinely never knew existed. Throughout the 1950s, when the Kefauver Committee held televised Senate hearings investigating organized crime, Las Vegas officials testified under oath that there was no organized crime problem in their city. They believed it. The casinos appeared legitimate. The ownership licenses were held by respectable businessmen. The tax records seemed proper. Everything looked clean. They had no idea that Meyer Lansky held hidden ownership interests, points, in nearly every major casino on the Strip: the Flamingo, the Sands, the Thunderbird, the Tropicana. His estimated 30% ownership of major casino operations was completely invisible to Nevada gaming authorities because he'd structured it to be invisible. FBI surveillance reports from the 1960s documented what officials missed. Meyer Lansky still has major interest in hotel and gambling casino, in spite of fact he does not appear as owner. The Bureau methodically traced his $2.2 million in Las Vegas casino investments that generated over $1 million in cash income annually from skimmed profits. Money that never appeared on official books. Money that flowed to numbered Swiss accounts that Lansky had pioneered using in 1932. The FBI's exposure went beyond just documenting the skim. They revealed the entire infrastructure of organized crime's control of Las Vegas. Lansky wasn't operating alone. He was the financial conduit for the National Crime Syndicate, the crucial position connecting Chicago outfit bosses, New York's five families, and other criminal organizations to their secret casino investments. He served as what one FBI report called the mob's accountant, organizing figures and reporting to the IRS for his fellow syndicate leaders, ensuring the illegal enterprise maintained a legitimate facade. The Bureau's investigation techniques were sophisticated. Bugged hotel rooms captured Lansky discussing organized crime operations. Long-term surveillance documented his meetings with known criminals. Informants like Vincent "Fat Vinny" Teresa provided insider testimony about how the system worked. Money collected from illegal gambling operations, delivered to Lansky in Florida, then laundered through his network of offshore banks and shell companies. Federal investigators discovered that Lansky had extended his offshore banking system internationally. The numbered Swiss accounts he'd established in the 1930s were just the beginning. By the 1950s, he'd bought an offshore bank in Switzerland itself, using it to launder money through a complex network of shell and holding companies. The financial sophistication that Lansky believed made him untouchable was being mapped, documented, and exposed by American financial investigators. The FBI even documented how Lansky had corrupted local officials. In one Nevada county, he'd established a system where his associates would repeatedly get charged with disorderly conduct, never appear in court, and pay hefty non-appearance fines directly to county officials. A graft system disguised as legitimate court fines. When FBI surveillance caught Lansky watching television discussions about organized crime in the late 1950s, they recorded his reaction to claims that organized crime was second in size only to the US government. Lansky told his wife that organized crime was actually bigger than US Steel. The statement revealed his supreme confidence and would later be used against him in court. The Bureau stopped actively surveilling Lansky in 1971, not because they'd given up, but because they'd already documented everything. The damage was done. With media and law enforcement attention increasing, the hidden ownership structure became untenable. When Howard Hughes began buying up Las Vegas casinos in 1967, it marked a fundamental shift. The casinos were being sold to legitimate corporate owners. The mob's hidden control was ending. By the early 1970s, organized crime had lost much of its power and prestige. Lansky's standing as a leading figure in the mafia had diminished accordingly. The FBI had accomplished what seemed impossible. They'd penetrated decades of financial sophistication, exposed the invisible empire, and forced it into the light where it couldn't survive. Las Vegas officials finally understood what had been hidden from them. Their entire gambling industry had been controlled by organized crime through a system so sophisticated they'd never suspected it existed. And American federal investigators had systematically dismantled it through persistence, surveillance, and financial forensics that matched and ultimately exceeded Lansky's criminal genius. The FBI investigations into Meyer Lansky didn't just expose one man's criminal empire. They triggered the complete transformation of Las Vegas from a mob-controlled gambling town into a legitimate corporate entertainment capital. By the late 1960s, the writing was on the wall. Federal law enforcement pressure, particularly the investigations targeting Lansky and other organized crime figures, had made hidden casino ownership increasingly untenable. The era of mob control over Las Vegas casinos that had lasted from about 1950 to the early 1980s was entering its final chapter. The turning point came in 1966, when billionaire recluse Howard Hughes arrived in Las Vegas and did what Attorney General Robert Kennedy's crusade against the mob had failed to accomplish. Hughes bought the Desert Inn from its mob-connected owners, then proceeded to acquire the Sands, Frontier, Castaways, Silver Slipper, and Landmark casinos. In total, Hughes invested over $300 million in Las Vegas real estate and casinos, becoming the city's largest employer with transparent corporate ownership structures. Hughes' purchases accomplished what years of FBI investigations had been working toward, forcing the mob out through legitimate buyouts. When media and law enforcement attention increased following the Lansky investigations, casinos became too hot for organized crime to maintain control. Selling to Hughes provided an exit strategy that allowed mobsters to liquidate their hidden interests without admissions of guilt. The transformation accelerated in 1969 when the Nevada legislature passed the Corporate Gaming Act, making it easier for publicly traded corporations to own casinos. Previously, every stockholder had to be licensed individually, an impossible requirement for large corporations. The new law changed everything, opening Las Vegas to Wall Street investment and legitimate corporate ownership. Congress followed in 1970 by passing the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations (RICO) Act, giving the Justice Department unprecedented power to prosecute entire criminal enterprises rather than individual crimes. RICO made it possible to target the leadership structures and financial networks that the FBI's Lansky investigation had exposed. For the first time, authorities could prosecute mafia families as ongoing criminal enterprises. Organized crime strike forces were created in major American cities, including Las Vegas, focused solely on dismantling mob activities. The techniques developed during the Lansky investigations, financial forensics, long-term surveillance, strategic use of informants, became standard practice. The FBI's success in mapping Lansky's invisible empire provided the blueprint for attacking organized crime's financial infrastructure across the country. By 1971, Hilton Hotels bought Kirk Kerkorian's casinos, marking another major corporate takeover. Other indigenous operators like Showboat and Harrah's went public. The mob's three critical advantages: access to capital through union pension funds, willingness to use violence, and hidden ownership structures that evaded regulation, were systematically eliminated by corporate competition, federal prosecution, and enhanced regulatory oversight. The Nevada Gaming Control Board, established in 1955 but significantly strengthened in the 1970s, implemented stringent licensing requirements designed specifically to keep criminal elements out. Background investigations became exhaustive. Financial transparency became mandatory. The board worked closely with federal investigators, sharing intelligence and coordinating enforcement actions. The decline of mob control meant the end of the systematic skimming operations that had defined Las Vegas casino economics for decades. Corporate owners with fiduciary responsibilities to shareholders couldn't skim profits. Transparent accounting replaced hidden cash flows. Regulated gaming replaced mob-controlled operations. By 1985, mob-related figures were mostly out of Las Vegas casino ownership. The transformation was complete. The city that Bugsy Siegel, Meyer Lansky, and the National Crime Syndicate had built as their private gambling empire had become a legitimate corporate entertainment destination, generating billions in taxable revenue. The FBI's Meyer Lansky investigation had been a critical catalyst. By exposing the hidden ownership structures, documenting the financial sophistication of mob control, and demonstrating that federal investigators could penetrate even the most elaborate criminal schemes, the Bureau had made organized crime's casino operations unsustainable. Las Vegas today, with its mega resorts owned by publicly traded corporations, its regulated gaming industry, and its status as America's entertainment capital, exists because American law enforcement systematically dismantled the mob's invisible empire. Meyer Lansky's financial genius had helped create modern Las Vegas. The FBI's exposure of that genius helped transform it into something even the mob's accountant never imagined, a legitimate business. Meyer Lansky believed he was untouchable, the mob's accountant who'd revolutionized organized crime through financial sophistication. The man who'd watched Al Capone get convicted of tax evasion in 1931 and vowed never to make the same mistake. The criminal genius who'd pioneered numbered Swiss bank accounts, offshore banking, and money laundering operations that stretched around the world. He'd spent nearly 50 years as a member and participant in organized crime, controlling gambling empires in Las Vegas, Cuba, Miami, and New Orleans. He'd been instrumental in developing the National Crime Syndicate alongside Lucky Luciano. He'd held hidden ownership interests, points, in virtually every major Las Vegas casino. His $2.2 million in casino investments generated over $1 million in cash annually from systematically skimmed profits. He'd built an invisible empire that Las Vegas officials never knew existed, and the FBI dismantled all of it. The core lesson was brutal. Financial sophistication doesn't beat investigative persistence. Lansky believed American law enforcement couldn't penetrate his layered shell companies, his numbered accounts, his front operators, his offshore banks. He was wrong. FBI agents spent years conducting surveillance, bugging hotel rooms, recruiting informants, and meticulously documenting every hidden ownership interest, every skimmed dollar, every offshore transaction. The irony is perfect. Before fleeing Cuba in 1959, Lansky was worth an estimated $20 million, equivalent to $184 million today. When he died of lung cancer on January 15, 1983, at age 80, his estate was worth approximately $57,000, less than many middle-class Americans. The man who'd told associates that organized crime was bigger than U.S. Steel died nearly penniless in a modest Miami Beach apartment. Where did the money go? The FBI had exposed his system. With media and law enforcement attention increasing, the hidden casino ownership became untenable. The casinos were sold to legitimate corporate owners like Howard Hughes. The skim dried up. The point system dissolved. The invisible empire once exposed couldn't survive in the light. Despite nearly 50 years in organized crime, Lansky was never convicted of anything more serious than illegal gambling. His 1953 misdemeanor conviction in Saratoga Springs that resulted in 3 months in jail and $2,500 in fines. He was acquitted of tax evasion in 1973. His contempt conviction was overturned on appeal. His final skimming case was dismissed due to ill health, but the FBI had won anyway. They didn't need to convict Meyer Lansky to defeat him. They simply needed to expose him. American institutional competence, FBI surveillance, IRS financial forensics, multi-agency coordination proved more powerful than decades of criminal sophistication backed by the National Crime Syndicate. The Bureau's investigation forced the transformation of Las Vegas from a mob-controlled gambling town into a legitimate corporate entertainment capital. The techniques developed investigating Lansky, financial forensics, long-term surveillance, strategic use of informants, became the blueprint for attacking organized crime's financial infrastructure nationwide. The FBI stopped actively surveilling Lansky in 1971, not because they'd given up, but because they'd already accomplished their mission. By then, organized crime had lost much of its power and prestige, and Lansky's standing as a leading figure in the mafia had diminished accordingly. He'd become irrelevant. The man who believed he was too sophisticated to catch spent his final years living quietly in Florida, never giving any indication he was wealthy or influential in the mob. When he died, the FBI still believed he had millions hidden in banks around the world. They searched. They found nothing. Just a modest home and $57,000. One FBI agent had said, he would have been chairman of the board of General Motors if he'd gone into legitimate business. Instead, Lansky chose organized crime, and American law enforcement systematically dismantled everything he built. The lesson for every would-be criminal genius: financial sophistication, offshore accounts, hidden ownership structures, Swiss banking secrecy. None of it matters when facing American investigative persistence. The FBI will map your empire. They'll document your system. They'll expose what you thought was invisible. And once exposed, it all falls apart. Meyer Lansky was the smartest mobster in American history, and he still lost to federal investigators who simply refused to give up. American justice doesn't negotiate with criminal sophistication. It just keeps investigating until there's nothing left to hide.